Kevin Hassett had to say about.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to American Advocates. This is technically, I believe, episode 37. Today, like I promised, I'm going to be discussing the latest updates on this Trump economy, what's going right, what's going wrong. To be honest with you, a lot going wrong. So that'll be disappointing to, I think, a lot of the, unfortunately, to a lot of the MAGA people out there, anybody that happens to be watching. Not expecting a large audience today. Today is Saturday, so if you're watching a live stream about politics and most importantly about the economy on a Saturday, well, you honestly just don't have much of a life. So, but I'm going live anyway. I am Goy to the YouTube. I am their cattle. I must go live daily. Otherwise, I will be punished in the long term by the algorithm with lower views and lower exposure. So here we are. I wanted to discuss some of the economic reports that have come in lately. Starting off with at least a video that's highlighting some of the better news centered around the economy. And then though I'm an optimist in true pessimist fashion, I am going to highlight some of the issues that I have with the way this was reported. So we're going to cover that here. Hey, 2009 lifeguard, I have no life. It's raining, says 2009 lifeguard. Yeah. Hey, well then stay indoors, or, you know, if it's a nice day where you're at, like it is for me. I think it did rain earlier today here where I'm at, but it's a very beautiful day where I'm at. Super nice. It looks like where I'm at, we're skipping spring and going right to summer. So if it's like that for you, then go outside, sit on your porch or something. If you got a roof, just pay attention to what's going on that way. Enjoy the rain. Truthfully, the rain's my favorite weather, to be honest with you. So, but yeah. So let's cover. I want to break down this video right here just a little bit. This was an economic report that came in last month, and so you can already see. It will be showing the fact that it's dated. It's going to be showing the fact that it's a little outdated already, technically, when it comes to the economy. It is over a month old now, but there were some things that I wanted to cover on what was talked about here. So, and of course, the caption even says, voters are frustrated, but the economy is telling a different story. And the theme of this video is going to be basically, we're just lagging behind, and you got to give it a little more time, which is a message that I halfway agree with. But let's take a look. This is some of the more positive stuff I'll be showing on this stream right now.
Listen to what Kevin Hassett had to say about the economy.
We are firing on all cylinders here at the Trump White House. I think that the Trump's op-ed that you just talked about really laid out the case, the very, very strong case for what we've been doing. He went to Davos and he said, hey, not only is the U.S. booming with our growth north of 5%, but you guys are booming too, because when the U.S. booms, the world booms. And so we are reordering the world order, and it's going to end up being great for everybody. The bottom line is that there are great, great things coming next year. All of the big, beautiful bill refunds are going to start coming into people's pockets, and we expect that will move these polls.
Well, Trump and his team keep on saying, look, everything's fine. When will people, voters, see it that way, Steve?
Yeah, that is a tough question to answer, Stuart, because we saw over the weekend another big Republican loss in Texas. So Republicans keep losing these special elections all over the country, and it is troubling. I mean, this was a district that flipped 20 points towards Democrats over where they were in 2024 when Trump won.
Yeah, that's actually something I haven't even discussed yet, what's been going on in Texas and how the Democrats have formed what I would still refer to as a pipe dream, but unfortunately something that is looking slightly more possible than it should when it comes to turning Texas blue, and that's quite unfortunate in and of itself. You know, a lot of these special elections are starting to tell the tale, and I think I pointed to this last year during those 3 special elections we saw in Virginia, New Jersey, and can't remember that other state now, but, you know, Abigail Spanberger was one of the main ones. And I was pointing that out back then, and I said, listen, this is a sign of things to come. Meanwhile, MAGA cheerleader channels, of course, were saying, you don't know what you're talking about. These are offbeat special elections, 2025. They mean nothing. They're in Democrat states as it is. Virginia, by the way, is only ever supposed to be light blue at most, and Spanberger won pretty definitively. So, and she won with an state attorney general pick that was involved in a massive scandal, by the way, threatening Republicans and joking about how he wished that their family would die. and she still won. And so what this is really pointing out, oh, Mamdani was the other example too. And people were like, oh, it's New York City, oh, super Democrat already. Yeah, we all were expecting that. People were missing the point back then, and they continue to miss the point now. But Texas is in more trouble than it should be in. Texas should be a permanent red state, and we're seeing a lot of these special elections pop up that are pointing us in the other direction and showing us and reminding us that, honestly, economic populism is what wins elections. And this current Republican GOP, this current grand old party, has already lost sight of that in numerous different ways, and now we're in a war in the Middle East. And they've taken their eye off the ball once again, and it's left the opening for Democrats to move on in, and they're adapting their message, and I'm going to show that in a second here. But you know what the theme of this video here was back in February before we went to war in Iran was essentially that you got to give it time, because the Trump economy is putting in the work now, but the results are lagging behind. And this is typical, to be fair. I even wrote this on my X. This is typical of what happens under any presidential administration. You don't typically get to see the effects of their actions towards the Trump economy or even the Biden economy until right around the 2-year mark. And that's why people always complain about the tragic timing of the midterm elections, because a lot of times these midterm elections do come just before we're really seeing the effects of the current administration play a part in the economy. This was the case with Biden as well when it came to the Biden economy, though I have also been fair when it comes to the inflation we saw under Biden, and I do still blame Trump for part of that. I think rightfully so. He was in favor of the COVID lockdowns, shutdowns, etc. So that didn't help Biden whatsoever. But Biden, of course, got in and terribly mismanaged everything and made it probably worse than it needed to be. And we saw 9.1% inflation under Biden in what year? 2022. So again, in that 2-year mark, at least 18 months. And that's kind of what this video was highlighting here. Kevin Hassett, of course, is a dove for President Donald Trump. And he's basically saying, look, you got to give it more time, at least 6 months. But, we could be looking at the 2-year mark once again before we see the effects. I'm inclined to agree with that. Just that's how it always goes. However, I do want to point out something. Again, the date of this economic report that came in was February 3rd, and this was before we decided to go to war in the Middle East once again in Iran. And yes, the bottom line is this is a war. There's no way around it. This is very much so a war, right? So, this economic report was not factoring that in whatsoever. And war is literally never beneficial to the U.S. economy, certainly not in the short or midterm. And what we've been seeing with the lasting effects of the original 2000s Middle East wars, not in the long term either. It drove up our national debt by trillions of dollars. We went into more debt to fund those wars, by $6 trillion for Iraq, for instance. And if this becomes a long, drawn-out war, which I predict it will be, and I'm willing to stand corrected. I'm actually hoping to stand corrected. I am hoping that in 5 weeks I can come on here and say I was totally wrong. Trump was very effective. Iran has completely surrendered. The regime is dead. This was successful. It wasn't that costly, but I just don't think I'm going to be for a whole host of different reasons. First and foremost, this war is costing us on average $2 billion or more per day. Secondly, we've already lost, I believe now it's 7 American lives in this war, and many are speculating that number is being underreported. And then thirdly, the Iranian regime is it's an ideology, it's a religion, and Trump's terms now are complete surrender, which is going to force them to get more extreme, not less. And so I already talked about last night why I believe boots on the ground is very likely inevitable in that region, which will drive up costs and death and tank the GOP in the midterms. So I want to be wrong about that. I just don't think I am. I hope I am. I hope, like I said, a month and a half from now I can say I was totally wrong. We'll see. But war's never good for the economy is the bottom line. And this report came out before then. So I wanted to address that first and foremost. Yes, generally, the rule of thumb is you have to wait about 18 months into a president's term, sometimes up to 24 months really, before you can even start to see the real effects of that president's economic policies. and that would be the case in this instance, but I have a feeling, unfortunately, that this war is going to be prolonged, and if it is, that means that the effects that we should be seeing from this Trump administration and its economic policies might either be dwindled, might either be less than what they should be, or worse than what they should be, and at the worst case scenario, they could be really bad, and in some cases, we could see economic markers coming in worse than what we saw under Biden. People are pointing out the gas prices, for instance, and how those are now creeping up to Biden-era levels already. So we'll have to wait and see on that one, but that's the first point I wanted to discuss when it came to this video. Hey, what's up, Calendarman? He says, what's cooking? And then he shows the egg skillet. What's cooking right now is Iran, honestly. Iran is getting bombed like crazy. And I'm going to show you guys that in a second here as well. But discussing the Trump economy right now and what I believe we're going to see this year when it comes to that. Actually, that leads me to my next point as well, of course, which is, by the way, follow me on X, American Advocates, Uncensored, at American_Advo, ADVO. I have the link to my account pinned in the chat, or at least it should be pinned in the chat. You can also see right here, you can join. I did form a community. It doesn't have anybody in it right now. I'm a small channel, obviously. But once this community has some members in it, I'm going to start posting directly in that community, maybe some videos, especially just for X, as well as possibly notifications for when I go live or post videos on my YouTube will be posted in that community over time if I can grow it. So you can join that as well if you follow me there. Now, what I wanted to point out here, the next thing I wanted to address, where is that? Right here. This is the next point right here I wanted to talk about. This is the manufacturing sector report here, and this one's important to discuss. And I think it highlights a part of the problem. These are things that people don't take into account when it comes to the economy. This is, looking at certain economic markers. You can look at the generalized stuff, the mainstream stuff like inflation, the stock market. I guess I actually over time am growingly becoming more frustrated with people who identify the Dow Jones as the stock market. But you can kind of look at the stock market in its appropriate context to determine how well stuff is doing. Like I said, inflation, you can look at consumer prices, but there are other things, there are other underlying economic markers that most people won't look at that can really give you a behind-the-scenes picture of what's actually happening. And I've actually used some of these economic markers last year to wisely predict and accurately predict precious metals going up as high as they did. I don't know if I made all of those predictions on my channel here, but I did make several good ones before in the past. I predicted NVIDIA doing very well. I invested in NVIDIA during the April 8th tariff dip, and I bought in at 96 a share, sold it for close to 180 a share, made a good profit on that. I think I've talked about gold enough on this channel. I believe I mentioned silver back in September, well before it was even over $40 an ounce, and I was very clear. I think I made this on my YouTube channel. I was very clear it was going to hit $100 an ounce. I was certainly telling people in my personal life about that. And the reason why I was able to do that, by the way, is because precious metals are a way to hedge your bets against an economy not doing well. And I think this started becoming more and more clear to me that we're in several different bubbles, and it's really just a matter of time for when they will pop. Now, of course, Trump is going to do everything he can to make sure these bubbles do not pop during his administration. Biden actually did the same thing. We've been in bubbles now, economic bubbles of varying degrees for various different sectors for quite a few years. And every president has kind of just done their best to keep that bubble from popping. And it's like hot potato. It's like just last 4 years, just last 8 years, and then toss the scalding hot potato to the next guy who gets elected in, and may he do his best to juggle it without burning his hands. And that's really what's happening with our economy. There's no way around that. That is what's happening, and I don't know how we even begin to solve that problem. I think nothing short of intentionally deflating things, which of course would make any president look bad, which is why they don't do what's necessary. But I think anything short of intentionally doing that is not going to solve the problem, and only continue to risk it popping at any second. So precious metals are the way to hedge your bets on that, which is why I've been so favorable of them. I've also looked at certain economic markers, like the fact that trucking companies were not buying more trucks last year. This is a insider knowledge kind of thing when it comes to stock market trading. if you ever want to know whether or not you should be bullish or bearish in stock market investment, you need to take a look at manufacturing, and you need to take a look at infrastructure and supply chains and see what people are doing with those. So the fact that trucking companies were not buying more trucks is actually a bad sign. It means they're anticipating less deliveries, less loads. They're anticipating that means, of course, less economic growth, less business, less manufacturing. And that was something I paid attention to last year. So it's why I haven't been super active in the stock market. Not that I'm rich enough to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars that you really need to make a living off of it anyway, but it's always fun to meddle in the stock market and take lessons from it. And that is why ultimately I was so much more bullish on precious metals than I was on the stock market in general. And the only real investment that I made last year, like I said, was NVIDIA during the April 8th tariff dip, because I knew right away, obviously, while everyone else, of course, was predicting a second Great Depression, which I stood against on this channel, adamantly so and accurately so. And I made money on the stock market, trusting my instincts over what the Democrats were saying was going to happen because of the tariffs. That was the only instance, really, where I was involved in the stock market at great length. Otherwise, precious metals are the play. And this report right here from the Kobasi letter kind of is now really emphasizing, this came out 7 hours ago, it's kind of really re-emphasizing and once again validating the way that I look at the market and the trucking companies. This is the U.S. manufacturing sector report. So I'm going to click on this. There's some details here. I'll do my best to explain what it means to you guys. I did see some more chats coming out here. This is going to be 2008 all over again, and it's most likely going to be worse, says Cemetery 76. It could be, yeah. I mean, we'll see what happens. If you're talking strictly about the housing market crash, we'll see. The housing market, I'm actually kind of dealing with the housing market myself, and it does seem to be in a bubble. That bubble actually seems to be growing right now in some ways, but only in bad ways. I actually think the housing market already kind of has crashed. I would say roughly 4.5 years ago now, maybe 3 years ago at most. I think it crashed already, and I don't think sellers have realized it. I think a lot of people assume this is still a seller's market, and it's not. It shouldn't be, certainly. But when you look at the graphs and the trends for the housing market, you can see very clearly, I believe, where it crashed somewhere around 2021 to 2022. So, and that does, of course, mean a bubble, because right now what's happening is houses are still being massively overpaid for by the buyers. People are paying way more for houses, and that will pop eventually, of course. It pretty much has to. So, Bear says, as end month due to Trump bullying Canada, 420,000 jobs are gone. No, not that many jobs at the end of the month. Or you mean at the end of this month? Are you projecting that? Because that's just speculation. But the February job reports I'm going to cover in a minute as well. Anyways, here's the U.S. manufacturing sector report. According to the Kobasi letter, it says the ISM manufacturing PMI index fell 0.3 points in December to 47.9, the lowest since October of 2024. Now, real quickly, I'll just explain to you guys. The PMI index is basically like if you're in school getting a report card, and like on your report card, any grade over a 60 or a 65, depending on where you live, is a passing grade. For the PMI index, that number is 50. So anything under 50 is a bad sign. It means you were not really breaking even when it comes to manufacturing and production, and we're in the negative. So 47.9 down 0.3 points to that is an indicator that manufacturing is on the downturn, right? And this marks the 10th consecutive monthly contraction. It goes on to say only 11% of industries reported growth, the second lowest reading since April of 2009, down 39% from a year ago. Excuse me. New orders came in at 47.7. Once again, that's under 50, remaining in contraction for the fourth consecutive month. Inventories fell 3.7 points to 45.2. And so what that is saying, by the way, here's the deal with that. Here's the summary of this. So manufacturers aren't manufacturing as much goods right now. That manufacturing is on the decline. We're not making as much stuff, is basically what this is saying. And then you're seeing the report that inventories fell 3.7 points to 45.2 points, the fastest drawdown since October of 2024 once again. So and it does say it actually. It says it indicates that firms are relying on existing stockpiles to satisfy tepid demand. This is telling you something. What this is telling you is we had existing stockpiles of stuff that's previously been manufactured. Those stockpiles are not being depleted very fast, so we're not manufacturing more stuff to continually supply the stockpiles. This means manufacturing is declining because people aren't buying stuff, the economy's not doing well, is basically what it means. And it's so slow that existing stockpiles right now are still satisfactory enough to supply the demand that's out there. And so we're not even, that's what this is telling you. Everything is slowing down right now. And that's why that previous report that I told you, where it's like you got to wait 18 months, is basically what they were saying. Well, this is a problem, in all honesty. And manufacturing is something that we really want to promote here in America. We want manufacturing to be on the uptick. We want to get to a point where we are not relying on the rest of the world to manufacture our goods. We want to increase domestic manufacturing. We want to increase and develop our supply chains more and improve our infrastructure overall. This is going to be, by the way, a multi-presidential goal. Not one single president can accomplish that. Even if Trump was doing stellar right now, which in all honesty, he isn't, even if he was, he wouldn't be able to do what's necessary in 4 short years to really build back America's independence from the rest of the world. But that should be and needs to be a goal of ours. And this is a bad sign when it comes to our manufacturing for a multitude of different reasons. But U.S. manufacturing is in trouble, and it's reflective, by the way, of the fact that our economy is slowing down. Why? Because our affordability is poor. Our cost of living is borderline in crisis. And so people just aren't buying as much stuff. And so what you're seeing, basically, the analogy would be, I would say the analogy would be something like a toy store. And basically these toy stores have stuff on the shelves already for sale. And essentially the toys are not being bought. This is probably true anyway right now. If you've gone down the toy aisle, it's like those are expensive too. Like Lego sets when I was a kid compared to what they are now, outrageous. So just that's the analogy. It's like a toy store. The Lego sets they're all on the shelves, and they're just not being bought at a fast enough pace. And so the manufacturers aren't producing more Lego sets at a correct pace. Everything's slowing down. Worse yet, the plastic suppliers, right? The plastic's not being bought to make the Legos, and everything's slowing down. It's basically kind of the analogy here. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. I see Bold as a Lion's back. Hey, Bold as a Lion. I just saw that we bombed a desolation, I don't know how to pronounce that word, water plant in Iran. This could affect so many surrounding countries. I wonder if it's true. We will see. I'm going to be covering that a little bit here because this is mostly economic reporting going on. I'm mostly just reporting on economics today, but the Iran war stuff is having an effect on our economy, and we did just bomb. I'll cover it in a second. I'll cover it in a little bit. 2009 Lifeguard says, my small business is booming in a rural town. I'm a tradesman, but I have seen an uptick in individuals asking me for hourly work. Yeah, well, the jobs markets, 2009 Lifeguard. We're going to cover that in a second as well. So that was the next thing I wanted to cover here. Yeah, but the jobs market, there is a big demand right now for jobs. And I don't really care what the old generation say. The boomers talking about how nobody wants to work anymore. I just don't agree with that. I think that plenty of people want to work and they're having a hard time finding jobs. Was that the next thing I was going to cover, in fact? Yeah, it was actually. So let's get right to that. The February jobs market reports have come in and they're not good. Where did I have that one? Nope. Yeah, here we go. Okay.
Excuse me. Go.
Okay, so this is Fox Business. This is a Fox Business News report when it centered around the February jobs market report. Not good news. We'll take a listen.
We go. So we have a negative number for February non-farm payrolls, a loss of 92,000 jobs. You can see the market reacting. We are also seeing the unemployment rate tick up to 4.4%. A loss of factory jobs of 12,000. Government jobs, a loss of 6,000. Private sector jobs, a loss of 86,000. Average hourly earnings up 3.8%, which is better than expected. But obviously the headline here is what we're seeing within the report. We also got a negative read on January retail sales, 0.2% to the downside. But I do want to say again, it is the jobs report.
So retail sales are down first and foremost. So I want to confirm that, of course, like I'm saying, basically, even in retail. Now, of course, I was just covering manufacturing. That's going to deal with more stuff like material supplies, like steel, aluminum, etc. But retail sales are down as well. On top of that, what she's saying here, basically, it's 92,000 total jobs lost. And the thing is, the projections, the wildly optimistic estimated projections for the jobs in February, it was supposed to grow by, I believe, 52 or 56,000. And so it not only came in short, but it came in the negatives by a lot. Now, she goes on to say it's, 6,000 government jobs. Those are jobs we do not care about on this channel. Government jobs, I call them fake jobs. Biden overinflated the jobs market deliberately in an attempt to make his administration look more successful by adding tons of government jobs. This creates bloat in our government. We wind up wasting more money to pay useless people to do stuff that they don't really need to be doing. Tasks that could be given to one person instead in the name of efficiency. It's in fact why a small part of the reason why Doge was even formed at the beginning of this second term for Trump. It was in part to get rid of that, and he has been doing that. And that's one of the things I do support from him. He's started to gut the IRS. He gutted the Department of Education. A lot of useless jobs, right? So the government jobs, 6,000 down, that's actually a good thing in my opinion. And by doing that, that does hurt the jobs report to some degree. That actually does hurt in the short term our GDP even to some degree, and possibly our economy overall as a result. But it's worth it in the long run to eliminate government bloat. However, the private sector losing so many jobs, I think she said it was 86,000 or 84,000, was it? That's insane. That's an insane number for the private sector to be losing jobs-wise. And the main issue here, in my opinion, I think one of the main issues that this administration is woefully, in my opinion, unprepared to deal with, and in all honesty, completely oblivious to, really is the fact that it's, it's a multitude of things, but AI. AI, in my opinion, is one of the biggest enemies that Americans are facing, especially on a domestic front. And I've covered this before. I've dedicated entire live streams pretty much to it. But I am of the belief that even though it is not pro-free market, pro-capitalist, pro-America to say this, I am of the belief that the federal government must take the stance on AI to regulate it from a domestic standpoint. And this is simply because if we're not cautious enough and we're not careful about this, AI, which is already replacing human jobs in the name of efficiency, will only continue to do so. And AI is already making it difficult for people to find jobs. I've covered that in past episodes. The average Gen Z or millennial worker that has to find a job now simply must apply online more than ever. A firm handshake and a hello no longer really gets you a job, at least not with the big corporate businesses. Maybe at a local restaurant it does. But if you walk into a Walmart to shake the manager's hand and put in a paper application, they'll basically laugh at you and wonder why you went all the way there, because they're going to tell you to apply online. And when you apply online, your application is immediately filtered through an AI system that's set up to filter your application and search for specific keywords to trigger success. And if you don't nail that just right, your application is discarded pretty much immediately, and it doesn't even send you an email to notify you of such. You're just left hanging, essentially. And so the average Gen Zer and millennial now is having to apply to 1,200 jobs online to get one interview. And that's AI's fault. That's the corporation's fault that embraces AI, but it is AI as well. To make matters worse, of course, these are jobs that haven't been replaced by AI yet, and jobs are being replaced by AI. In my daily work, I've had to call several times what normally would be a human, and I'm greeted by an AI that can keep up and maintain a natural flow of conversation over the phone with me. And I would say about 60 to 70% of the time now, it actually solves my problems for me in a clear, concise manner. It speaks better English half the time than what I would be dealing with a human operator. And so in some ways, I'm grateful for that, because if it's going to replace Indians overseas, I'm happy anyway then about that. Fuck them. But, these should be American jobs in principle. They never were. And the overarching point of this is it's replacing people, regardless of how I feel about who was manning these jobs. And that's what I'm saying. About 65-70% of the time, it's an AI that handles it better for me, and I never have to even ask it to transfer me to a live operator, a human. And so these jobs are already being replaced. In prior episodes, I've mentioned as well, to briefly recap it, how I project in about 7 years' time, we could be at a point where 50% of the total American jobs have been actively replaced by AI. And that's a mixed bag of good and bad, mostly bad. I halfway jokingly, halfway seriously say that it's somewhat good, because a lot of these will be useless HR jobs held by catty women that nobody wants in the workforce anyway. But then the other reality is it is coming for jobs that people do want and jobs that are somewhat important, and it just makes no sense to me. That's the bottom line here. It makes no sense to me that AI is created to assist people, and we're getting to a point very quickly where the tables are being turned. And I could see a future where the question goes from how can AI help you to more or less you're useless, you serf. How can you help AI do its job? We'll pay you universal basic income, $2,500 a month, let's say, to basically be assigned to an AI to do its menial tasks so it can continue working for us and you work for it. That is an actual realistic possibility heading our way in the next 15 to 20 years at most, if we're not careful. And AI needs to be regulated, as the bottom line. And this jobs report is, in my opinion, hinting at that to some degree. There's more chats that have come in. Let me take a look before I continue to rant on here. I just, let's see. The job market sucks. People want to work. People do want to work, bold as a lion. I'm saying that. And that's not how it's being covered by or being looked at by boomers. Boomers have this perpetually negative view of the younger generations. And that's why, even though I'm a young millennial and I identify a lot more with Gen Z on a lot of issues as a result, because I'm literally only like a couple of years older than the oldest Gen Zer, I always made the promise, and Gen Z makes it easy for me to fulfill this promise, that I would never talk shit about Gen Z. And to be honest with you, no matter what Gen Alpha turns out to be like, I'm not going to talk shit about them either. We should be able to take a look at the world around us and understand the problems that the younger generations are facing. And I wish boomers could do that, but most of the time they cannot. And so they view it from the lens of 1985, peak American economy and culture, ease of life, quality of life at the all-time high. They got to capitalize off that. And their mindset is still focused on that. They still think it's 1985. So when millennials and Gen Zers are saying, well, I can't find a home, they're basically saying, well, yeah, the housing market went up. They'll acknowledge that because it's good for them. But then in the same line, they'll say, you just got to work harder to be able to pay for it. It's so bullshit, And I'll never be like that. I'll never age like that. And that is what they say. They say, well, nobody wants to work. These Gen Z kids don't want to work. They just like to be on their phone. The bottom line is they can't find work. And it's being replaced by AI. And then on top of it, you want to know another problem. This jobs market report won't ever cover this, especially Fox Business. Trump is pro H-1B visa, and that's a massive issue. That's a massive issue. It must be America first and Americans first. These are American jobs or at least they should be, right? But now we have a president that's completely just surrendered on the idea pretty much of mass deportations. Only violent illegal immigrants are being deported out of this country now, right? Those are the kind of people that would never be taking jobs from Americans to begin with. It's the non-violent illegal immigrants that are at least halfway respectable, granted, that will come here. They want to at least work, but in doing so, they're taking jobs away from Americans. They must go. H-1B visas must be made illegal. We don't need foreign help. Americans can learn and they can do any job. And in a lot of cases, the people who have already been replaced by H-1B visa Indians will tell you straight up, they're fucking stupid. These Indians come here, they don't know the job better than us. Instead, it's the corporations taking advantage of the better nature, we'll say, of third worlders, which is what India is. I don't consider it second world. It's certainly not first world. That's a third world country. It's a shithole, literally. Full of shit, literally. And they come here, and so as a result of being handed the opportunity to live in America, they're willing to do what Americans aren't. And this is not a good thing, by the way. It is for the corporations, but not for Americans. Americans are raised with the expectation of working a full-time job at 40 hours a week, and if it's a good job, they're raised with the expectation of being paid a livable hourly wage. This is not a socialist talking point. I'm never in favor of minimum wage going higher, by the way. I don't believe McDonald's workers should be paid enough to own a home. And the bottom line is what we see is every time minimum wage goes up for those workers, everything else goes up anyway. The economy just gets worse and outpaces it. And so now, all of a sudden, your cheeseburgers cost more because McDonald's workers are making $15 an hour, right? Or whatever it is in some of these very liberal cities. And ultimately, the McDonald's workers with that $15 an hour still can't buy a home or live very comfortably like the goal, which is basically the goal of doing that action and raising that minimum wage. So I'm not a socialist. I'm not for those kind of bullshit. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not for that. But I am for Americans going and getting educated in a meaningful field or a trade school, or being able to get a job based off of past experience and merit, a meritocracy. And I am a complete advocate for Americans holding jobs, if they qualify for it, that pay them really well. And as such, they only work, 40 hours a week? And I'm all for the Americans that want to grind out at 50, 60, 70, and 80 hours a week. You want to get a second job and really get ahead? Go for it. That's what America's all about if you want it to be that way. But just like how the boomers grew up, you should, in a first world country, the best country in the world by far, even still, today, the best country in the world by far, you should be able to work one job at 40 hours a week that you're qualified for, that's not a wagey, minimum wage, non-skilled labor job, and you should be able to live comfortably off of it. That's the ideal goal. And what's happening with these H-1B visa Indians, the corporations look at them as just much better than Americans for different reasons. The Indians will come here, they'll recognize the opportunity to be in America, and so they'll vow to work 12-hour days. They'll vow to work 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and they'll vow to work at 37% less hourly wages than an American. They're basically less expensive than an American worker. This is a betrayal to the American worker. This is a betrayal to America by these corporations. And Trump is in favor of this. And then they lie to us and they say the Indians are more qualified. But the Indians come in here, and anybody who's been replaced by them will tell you they don't know shit. Their bosses will come to these Americans and say, hey, this is Apu from India. He doesn't really know anything, but he's here on a visa. Could you please train him up for us? He really could use the precious opportunity here in America for a better life. What a great sob story. Sure, I'll train him. So you spend the next 3 to 6 months training Apu, who doesn't know shit, and then once he's fully trained by you, your boss comes to you and he says, hey, I got some bad news for you, actually. We're going to have to let you go. I know you've been here for 15 years now, but, we're going to have to let you go. Here's a pen, a water bottle, maybe even a fancy watch for all your time here. You'll, of course, have access to your retirement funds and what they're worth now, but you got to go. We got to let you go, unfortunately. We're getting rid of your position. And so that's what happens. And then what happens after that? A week later, your position is renamed to a slightly different name. And who's taking that position? The Indian man who's on the H-1B visa that you spent 6 months training. You trained him to replace you. And he's replacing you because now he's being paid under the slightly new name change position, 37% less per hour than you were, and he's willing to work 20 hours more a week than you were. And that's what's happening. And you can ask people, there's firsthand accounts all over the place on the internet of this happening. I know people personally who have been done dirty like this by corporations. And so that won't be reported in the jobs market report because the Indian is occupying the job. And so the 92,000 jobs that were lost in February really, in my opinion, only account for varying different factors. It's not even telling the full story. AI is probably playing a large part in that, but it's not telling the full story in the fact that it's even more jobs technically being lost if you want to count the fact that H-1B visa Indians are replacing Americans even more, right? So it's not painting the whole story, and that's why I have such a problem with the H-1B visas in this country. I'll take a look at some chats. It's pointless if the job doesn't pay the bills. It's counterproductive, says Bold as a Lion. And like I said, I just went off on my spiel, so I think you get the whole idea of where I stand on that. I don't believe, like, for instance, a McDonald's job is supposed to be a career unless you get promoted to manager, right? Or you become a franchisee. Then in that case, then even that, of course, should be a career then too, and rightfully so. And that's not to discount the fact that McDonald's is actually a pretty stressful job. It's not an easy job. It's restaurant work sped up with more pressure and anxiety. But you know, for the average teenager working there at McDonald's, it's a great teenager job. It's a great college kid job. That does sound boomerish, I'm aware, but that is how I view it. I think that's the correct way to view it overall. And then for the select few that become assistant managers and regional managers, then of course that should be paying very well then at that point. But most people won't have those positions ever at a McDonald's. And those jobs should be kind of temporary for various different reasons. It should be an introduction into the working force for teenagers, etc. But that's how I view them. Now, like I said, regular jobs, normal jobs, you know, skilled labor, yeah, it should be. We should be at a point where we can live well like boomers. Boomers got to live off of one income, etc. They could afford a car, a house, 2 kids, you know. And that's just not the case anymore, even with skilled labor jobs. And it is defeating. It's very defeating for especially Gen Z to come up into the world and see that. Government jobs equals adult women babysitting. Yeah, I agree, Bunch of Names. I completely agree. Welcome back, Bunch of Names, by the way. Appreciate you being here. And I completely agree with that. Government jobs, for the most part, you know, you're always going to need government jobs, but the problem is you get, most of the time, it's Democrats. They come in here and they just bloat out our government with more government jobs because the jobs market report will distinguish between them, but the overall job growth will still, you know, it'll still show a number that's higher than what it should be. Lisa says, hi. Hello, Lisa. Vort Zan says, Yankee, I have a question about your people. Here in Brazil, we start smoking marijuana at 10 years old. What age do your people start smoking? I've never smoked, so I don't know. Hopefully not at age 10, though. Marijuana, I think, largely is for losers. My place hired Filipinos and Indians on higher wages. Wow, King Ire. When we asked why, they said they're skilled and blamed the government. I said, then why do I have to train them then? Got a warning over it. Really, King Ire? See, thank you. Every time I discuss this at length, by the way, with people in my chats, the last time I discussed this topic, I'd say probably about 3 weeks ago, people were right there in the chat, perfect timing probably, and it was a woman. Her husband had passed away already, sadly, I remember, but she was giving an account about how what I was describing had literally happened to her husband and set them back majorly so, because her husband was planning on retiring, and they let him go before he could really get it all planned out and in action. He had been at his company for like 20 years, according to this woman's report in my chat 3 weeks ago. And he was replaced, and then he had to go on disability because he was old and he was too out of shape, you know, basically from years of manual labor. He couldn't work anymore either. So he was counting on finishing up his time at that job, according to this lady that was in my chat, and he got replaced. And the same thing happened. He trained his replacement, who was a foreigner. It's literally, in my opinion, it is traitorous to Americans and to our country. It's a big problem. And now you have King Ire here. This is even worse. This is an even worse account from him. Apparently, these Filipinos and Indians where he was from are being paid higher wages, and he's training them. So that's the ultimate spit in the face as an American. These people are being paid higher and more than you, and you train them to replace you on top of it, being fully aware they're being paid more, and they're there to replace you. This is sick. This is fucking sick. And it's a betrayal on Trump's part, too, to be standing for this. And they know, by the way, this, you don't get to exonerate Trump on this when it comes to him not knowing. Trump's a successful businessman, and he's in the circle of other successful businessmen. Don't ever forget Elon Musk was in favor of this last year as well, until he changed his stance on it, sensing that it was deeply unpopular. Hopefully being truly convicted of his stance. We'll never know, though. But Trump is in line. He's in a big circle of all of these corporate businessmen. These are his friends. He knows full well what this means, and he's still in favor of it. Doug Mart says, and if people quit trying to keep up with the Joneses and live within their means, they can do that, says Doug Mart. That's such a boomer stance. That's got to be rage bait. Trump is in favor of kicking the illegals out who have been knocking American wages down for years. No, he's not. Trump has completely switched his stance on immigration to the worst of the worst, and he's done so in the name, by the way, of midterm elections. It's too controversial. Everything was heating up too much around mass deportations for all illegals. So it's only the violent ones, and the violent ones don't tend to hold jobs. They're here to steal from us, violently so, mug us, rob us, rape us, you name it. This is what they've been found guilty of. They're the ones being deported only at this point. Not that that's a bad thing, but the bad thing is the softened stance on mass deportations. It needs to be all illegal immigrants. Trump has literally come out, and he just did it like 4 days ago again, and rehashed the story about how he told his people that they need to go easy on the farmers. The farmers are hiring illegal immigrants at like $3 an hour. Because why? Americans would want $7.50 an hour at least minimum wage in those states, right? They would want that at least. They'd want probably more than that to be out in the hot-ass sun picking crops, and rightfully so. And the problem there, of course, is in the short and midterm. Once again, if we did that, that would raise the cost of our produce. But whose fault is that? It's not the administration that decides the farmers need to start hiring American workers. It's the farmers' fucking fault. They're taking advantage. On top of that, we bail out farmers every single year. What we really should do, just to hide the inflated costs of the produce and allow everything to even out over time, we should just bail out the farmers again after we force them to hire Americans. Now at least Americans are being paid and Americans are holding those jobs. And the bailouts, we give them the bailouts in the form of covering the cost of the increase of produce goods to keep the cost down so it doesn't reflect poorly on the Trump administration for enacting that change. But that's why the administration ultimately decided against that. Produce costs would go up, and as a result, that's why the illegals are still holding jobs on farms. It should be Americans. I don't care what anybody says. It should be Americans holding those jobs. And that's what it means to be an American nationalist. And even if we couldn't cover the increased cost of produce, I would still be in favor of that. I am that much of a proud American and American nationalist. I care that deeply about Americans that if I knew, to the point where if I knew that Americans were taking back the jobs on the farms from the illegal immigrant Mexicans, I would happily pay 3 times the amount for a red pepper just so I could have the peace of mind knowing that Americans were being paid to do the work. It is that important. And the prices could even out over time. But the fact of the matter is this is a massive problem. And Trump is in favor of the farmers maintaining their illegal immigrant workforce. He's in favor of the service industry maintaining their illegal immigrant workforce, by the way. So maids and janitors, etc. And then he's in favor of H-1B visas. The Indians coming in here who are overqualified, way more qualified than you stupid Americans, coming in here and taking our jobs slowly. And then on top of it, to wrap it all up in a neat bow, we have AI being developed, and it's now preventing Americans from finding a job, and then on the other side, taking more jobs away. So it's all nonsense. It's atrocious, in all honesty. It really is. Charlotte Williams says that's some bullcrap he's talking about. Well, contend the point then. Contend the point. Contest the argument. Contend with the argument with something serious. You can't. Let's see. We are manufacturing cars that have the life expectancy of a cell phone. Yeah. We are building homes to the quality of modular homes, and we are simply doing so many things that really don't make sense at all, says Lifeguard. I agree. Hi, thanks for all this. No problem. No problem. Be sure to subscribe, by the way, to American Advocates if you haven't already, especially if you're enjoying the content. Double tap your phone screen to like the stream if you're watching on your phone, or hit the thumbs up if you haven't already as well. That's how this stream performs well in the algorithm. We are truly moving to a nation where no one owns anything. It's the World Economic Forum, Lifeguard. You will own nothing and be happy about it. And people keep buying it. I have no idea how people are paying rent, car notes, insurance, and the 15 subscriptions to everything every week. Exactly. Hey, well, as someone who's struggling through all of those, I can tell you they're barely doing it. The job I have is part-time. With Social Security and another part-time occupation, I could, yes, starve. Yeah, man, I'm going to cover that in a second, too. We have more news on that as well. Dave Smith says, fake news, fake news, fake news. Argue against it, then. Tell me what the real news is, Dave Smith. Bunch of names says, how long until states start adding discrimination clauses to their state constitutions saying employers have to hire illegals? Well, if this administration even tried to prevent that from happening, then you would see a lot of the Democrat states right off the bat do that. And I actually have a feeling you'd have to see Republican states start doing that too, because like I said, when it comes to the farmers hiring illegal immigrants, a lot of those farms are in Republican states. So it really is just at this point the system against the American people. It truly is. Now, what I wanted to move on to next, right here, because believe it or not, yes, it doesn't get better from here. Where is that one? By the way, this is my X account, at American_Advil. I believe I have the link pinned in the chat. You should go follow me on there. I have a community set up here. It's American Advocates Uncensored. Feel free to join that. I'm going to start, once I have some members in there, if I can get members in there, if anybody here likes me enough to have members in there that's actually young enough to be on X, because my problem is it's mostly boomers who don't even know what X is, then I'll start posting in there exclusively. And use it. I want to use it too because, in all honesty, the bottom line is with censorship and liberalism, a lot of these platforms, it's important to kind of own your audience. It's important to make sure that your audience is established on multiple platforms, because the bottom line is this could be gone at any day. And that's just the truth. And then you just never hear from me again is how it works, basically. At least not here. So I got to grow elsewhere is the bottom line. So that's what I'm trying to do. Now, what I wanted to talk about next, I just got to find it. I share so much stuff on here. Where is that shit? Here it is. Okay. Another
Fed says total household debt.
Not great indicator here. Another problem that I'm seeing with the economy. And again, I do want to emphasize the way I started off this stream, because there might be people in here right now that are that weren't here at the beginning. General rule of thumb for a president is 18 to 24 months before you really start to feel the effects of their economic changes and policies. So would I call this the Trump economy just yet? Not entirely so. Though Trump has influenced it quite a bit, so I would still credit a lot of this, whether it be good or bad, to President Donald Trump. Some of it could be lingering effects for Biden. And you know full well on this channel, I am not one of those MAGA TDSers that have TDS and only want to ever talk about positive stuff about Trump. I am a realist, and so I don't believe in bringing up Biden too much anymore. We are deep enough in the Trump administration where you shouldn't be blaming Biden for everything anymore. It's more about what Trump is doing. But that is the bottom line. Some of these economic thresholds and factors that we're looking at could still be lingering Biden effects. I'm not going to point out in any individual way what's what, but that is the reality of it. But we are fastly approaching the point, in my opinion, where there is no blaming Biden, and we are fastly approaching that point where it is the Trump economy. We'll be there by summer, in my opinion. Early summer is when you should be officially able to say, this is the Trump economy, this is what we're dealing with. And that, I would say around May or June, basically. So we'll see. We'll see what's going on here, but a lot of it's not looking good right now. And this Iran war is not going to help. And this was a report from quite a few months ago. It's not gotten better, but this was a report on Americans in debt. And this is something else you want to pay attention to. This is not the normal economic report you'll see on a CNBC or on a Fox Business, where it discusses, inflation, the stock market, the Dow Jones, the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, etc. Those are normal, even the jobs market report. That's the normal stuff. There's other underlying factors like I showed on that manufacturing report or on this American household debt report here. Take a listen to this.
Some of these numbers are pretty staggering, showing Americans are carrying more debt than ever before. A new report from the New York Fed says total household debt reached a record $18.6 trillion from July through September. And here's how that all breaks down. The biggest chunk of debt, $13 trillion, comes from mortgages, which is not surprising given how expensive it is to buy a home. Auto loans and student loans are next at about $1.7 trillion. Then you got credit card debt at $1.2 trillion. All of those are record highs. And when you look at credit cards, part of what's going on is that more people are using cards instead of cash to make purchases.
That's what you really want to look at. That's the big one, right? Mortgages are a problem, of course. Auto loans are a problem, of course. But those are standard part. Those are like a standard part of society now. You're always going to see that. That's always going to be a factor at this point. Credit card debt is the one you really want to look at. And it's tricky because Americans have always been pretty reckless with credit cards. There's a tendency to abuse it, of course. And I used to be a debt collector, so I know this to be true. But at the same time, when you see credit card debt going up very quickly, it's not a good sign of a healthy economy. Because it's not when credit card debt, when you see a credit card debt number during a healthy economy, you can attribute that to careless and stupid Americans who are using it to buy lavish things. But the bottom line is, when you look at the current economy, and we are in a borderline cost of living crisis, and you see credit card debt starting to spike even higher, what that means is that generally means there's at least a positive correlation to this, that Americans are using their credit cards to survive more. And that's not what you want to see. That is not an outcome this administration wants happening, but it does seem to be happening. And this was a report back in, I believe, November, but it has not gotten better. The credit card debt in this country is continuing to rise. I couldn't find any videos talking about it, but I've seen reports as early or as recently as 2 months ago in January that were also pointing to this problem. So credit card debt was going up. Now, again, there's another factor there, the holidays. And that is something, once again, that Americans will do when it comes to credit card debt. They'll go into some credit card debt briefly to buy more Christmas gifts if they have a large family, whatever. But again, even during the holidays, you still don't want to see credit card debt going too high because Americans should be doing well enough to not have to go into credit card debt to buy Christmas gifts. And they were. And that was a holiday report. I think I may have covered that on this channel. But I remember at the very least looking at it, and that was another realization there. And then it was validated, or, in January I saw the report, which kind of still was stating the fact that the credit card debt was still going up in January. So that's after the holidays, and it was still going up. Americans are using their credit cards for more purchases, very likely everyday purchases. We're talking groceries and other things that are basic essentials. So not a good report there. And once again, not a great indicator of a healthy economy. Let's see here. You have to think for yourself and search for the truth. That's what I'm doing, Cemetery. And search for the truth. Thinking the truth is going to be served to you on a silver platter is called insanity. Well, that's why I'm here. That is why I created this channel, by the way. Funny enough, I created this channel. I'm on the 1-year anniversary of my channel's creation. My first ever YouTube post was March 10th, and I think I created the channel a few days before then. So happy birthday to American Advocates. I created this channel originally because I voted for Trump, and I was actually happy this time last year with what Trump was doing. He was killing it. He was doing everything I wanted, and he was at least starting down the process of fulfilling campaign promises. So I created this channel to actually combat the liberal mainstream media because I kept seeing these ridiculously biased and false reports on Trump. And now it has slowly shifted over the past year to me reporting on the truth even at Trump's expense, because the fact of the matter is the MAGA cheerleader channels now don't want to talk about a lot of this stuff, and they don't want to report on a lot of this stuff because it's uncomfortable to talk about, and it's hard. It's hard for people who voted for Trump to acknowledge just how short this administration is coming when it comes to putting Americans first and dealing with our actual day-to-day real issues. But I'm here to say that that's what's happening, and if you don't like it, that's too bad, in all honesty. This channel exists to tell the truth no matter what. So, and I'm not saying that's what you're saying, Cemetery. I can't remember if you're an op in my chat or if you're on my side, but that's why this channel exists. Obama is blaming Bush to this day, says 2000. They always do. They always do. Always. So is household debt something that pulls us into an economic downturn, says whatever your name is. Household debt, something that pulls us to an economic downturn? Yes, because that can only go for so long before Americans are maxed out on their debt, and then they're swimming in debt. When you're drowning in debt, you're not buying anything then. And when you're not buying anything, that's when, well, that ties right back into the manufacturing report that I showed earlier on this stream. Manufacturing is down. It's slowing down even more. It's far under 50 points on the PMI index. So it's already happening, and it will get worse because in this country, you can usually go into quite a bit of debt before you're in serious trouble. But once you're in serious trouble, then you're just focused on being enslaved to that debt and paying it back or ignoring it. But then either way, you know, there's only a certain amount of debt you can go in before credit cards refuse to give you a card to go into more debt. You can't get a loan from a bank, etc. And then what? Well, then you're just living off tuna and ramen, right? So, yeah, it will bring about more of an economic downturn for sure. C. Joseph says, you're talking about the economy like it will be fixed in 1 year. Relax. Well, if you literally just got here, and I spent probably, I don't know, 2009 lifeguard, bunch of names, people who have been here since the start for the most part. How long did I spend with the preface of saying it takes 16 or 18 to 24 months to really see the effect of the Trump economy? How long did I spend prefacing this stream on that? I'm just here to give you the truth, Joseph. If you don't like it, then you can go somewhere else. Bordeaux fan? Bordeaux fan? I don't know how to say that, but have you always been a bootlicker, says Bordeaux fan. Whose boots am I licking? When he finishes his term, then you can talk about how the economy went. Oh, thank you for that, guys. Guys, I can no longer talk about the economy until Trump's term is finished. So that's going to be the end of the stream because Joseph has informed me I'm no longer allowed to talk about the economy. So I just want to thank everybody for tuning in to American Advocates. This stream will end immediately because I am not allowed to talk about the economy according to C. Joseph 0612. I cannot talk about it any longer. I'm prohibited. Thank you for everybody who tuned in. Have a great evening. Just fucking kidding. Fuck you. When he finishes his turn, you can talk about the economy. Get fucking serious. I can talk about the economy right now. Do you want to know why? Because I, as an everyday American, am impacted by it on a day-to-day basis. I'm sure you didn't apply that rule to 2022 Biden economy, did you? When inflation was 9.1%, did you decide to wait until 2024 to talk about Biden's economy? Or were you bitching and fucking moaning about it every single day like the rest of us? That is propaganda, essentially. If logic cannot be applied both ways, it is propaganda. That's what you're pushing here. Usually you can tell how a president did years after they were in office as cemetery. This is true. This is true. But still, it really doesn't matter. Credit cards and Christmas, hoping it's not more than that. It's more than that. It's more than just because of Christmas. And again, like I stated, even during Christmas, you don't want to see Americans going in excessive credit card debt for Christmas gifts either. We should technically, as first world Americans, be doing well enough to afford Christmas gifts without credit card debt. That's the idea, right? Maybe MAGA will get mad at me for saying that, but that is the idea. Really like your details. Appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. Okay, I want to move on to the next point here. And not that one, though. Because I just spent a lot of time talking about that one. So, the polling. That's what I want to talk about next. Let's move on to some polling. Oh, where are we? Yeah, hold on a second here. Okay. Actually, yes, this is what I wanted to discuss next. Another bad sign. Let me click on this. That's right. Not the polling just yet. We'll get onto the polling in 1 second here, but I shared this article on my X. I have it pulled up on my computer because this won't allow me to see the full Washington Street Journal report, but on my computer I'll be able to see it. So, actually, wow, it's like taking up my full screen. This is obnoxious from Wall Street Journal. Fuck you. I might not even read this report at this point. It's like taking up your whole screen. Like, get fucking serious. Here's the title of it. Let me see how that shows up on the video. That is crazy. You can't even see it on the video. Fuck Wall Street Journal for that. But the title of the article is Record Number of Workers Are Rating Their 401k Savings, okay? And this is, once again, not something you want to see happening if your economy is doing well. I'll read the article, even though they're pulling this is some bullshit that they're doing here. It's like it's eating the whole screen up. Wall Street Journal, it says, record number of workers are rating their 401k savings. A divergent economy has given people record retirement savings and more need to dig into them. More Americans are digging into their retirement savings because of financial emergencies. Last year, a record number, 6% of workers in their 401k plans administered by Vanguard Group took a hardship withdrawal. That is up from 4.8% in 2024 and a pre-pandemic average of about 2%, according to Vanguard. The data paints a divergent financial picture of American workers' finances. While most are faring well, some are experiencing heightened financial stress, according to Vanguard. Workers have been saving more in 401ks and balances have soared to all-time highs, the stock market for sure, along with rising markets. With more people saving in 401ks, retirement accounts are increasingly important lifeline when financial trouble hits. And so once again, it's like anything. This is a mixed bag when it comes to the economy. Yes, 401ks are doing much better under Trump. That's because the stock market's doing better. But on this channel, I harp on the fact that Wall Street, the stock market, is not Main Street, and that's for a reason. Trump makes several errors always by referencing the Dow Jones and the S&P 500 when it comes to the everyday American, because at the end of the day, over 50% total of Americans don't even have a 401k to dip into. And now what we're seeing is the reports are the ones that do, we're seeing a record number of people having to dip into them for a hardship withdrawal. Not a good sign. And though the number is still only 6%, which is low, of course, it's a record high number of 6%. It was 2% at pre-pandemic levels. So 3 times as worse off is essentially what's going on with that number when you look at it that way. And so that ties in once again, of course, with the credit card debt going up for Americans and the manufacturing being lower across the board here in America as well. So this is just the facts. These are just realities at this point, right? And what's going to happen going forward? Is the economy going to get better? Is it magically going to speed up in the next 4 to 5 months when we hit that 18-month mark of Trump being in office, where I believe it's officially appropriate to call it the Trump economy? I don't think so. And I think there's a lot of reasons why it's not going to happen that way. But a big reason why would be because of the Iran war. Hey, tired of this shot? Welcome, man. Appreciate you. So, that was that. And then I believe I had one more thing I wanted to discuss. Yes. This is what makes it even worse. It's not just all of these aforementioned reasons here, but I wanted to read this article as well, or at least cover it briefly here. The Democrats have started to really figure out what wins elections. And this is not something we want if you're a social and fiscal conservative like myself. And so the Democrats are readapting their campaign strategies for the midterms, and they'll certainly be doing this for 2028. While conservatives have taken their eye off the ball, while they've decided that foreign affairs are once again just much more important than the everyday American. We must liberate the Persians in Iran at any cost to us goy Americans. We must help Israel, right? Well, the Democrats are sitting here and they're acknowledging the fact that our U.S. economy, I wouldn't say is in turmoil just yet, but is not getting better, and that Americans are struggling. And so this Washington Post article, as reported by MSN, Democrats' plan would eliminate federal income taxes for half of U.S. workers. And you got to pause right here and you got to acknowledge something. The tendency here as a conservative is to go, well, it's the Democrats. They lie about everything, and if people believe that, they're stupid. Here's the bottom line. Do the Democrats lie about everything? No, actually, they don't. They lie about most things, yes. And they tell a lot of half-truths, yes. But what's happening here is desperation will cause a lot of Americans to believe half-truths or outright lies because it's desperation. They want to believe that somebody can help them. And that was what Trump ran off of. Trump won because he was an economic populist first and foremost. People had faith that the GOP would lower our cost of living if they were in power again. That's typically the accepted pattern when it comes to Republicans versus Democrats. The Republicans, when they're in office, tend to yield a better economy. The Democrats, when they're in office, tend to hand out more social rights and increase government jobs and welfare programs, etc., which makes the economy worse in the long run a lot of times. So that's the accepted patterns here. But now we're seeing that script start to be flipped. This is, I guess, apparently, this is the same guy that advocated for Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I recognize him right away, the Maryland senator. I can't remember his name. But I'll take a look at the article here. It says a Democratic senator, I hate that word Democratic, it's Democrat. Democrat senator viewed as potential 2028 presidential candidate. Give me a break. Will unveil a plan that he says would ensure roughly half of all U.S. workers pay no federal income taxes, according to details shared with the Washington Post. That's his name. Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland is expected to release the measure next week as Democrat lawmakers search for a sharp economic message to counter last year's Republican tax law. Under Van Hollen's proposal, workers making at or below a living wage, $46,000 for taxpayers filing individually, or $92,000 for married couples filing jointly, would not have to pay federal income taxes. Tens of millions of additional middle-class workers would also receive a tax cut under the proposal, but they would still have to pay taxes. The measure would be paid for by a new surcharge on millionaires that would raise roughly $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years. Will this work? No. We already know taxing the rich is not a valid strategy overall across the board, not even technically at a federal level, because the millionaires will take all kinds of shortcuts to ensure that they don't have to pay taxes. Some of those methods include, by the way, you put a cap at how much a business can make before it's taxed. The millionaires will make sure that they only make up to that amount by less than $1. So, for instance, a millionaire is told, well, if you earn $1 million a year or more, we're going to tax you 70% because you need to pay more taxes to benefit the everyday American. The millionaire will do everything he can to ensure that he only earns $999,999, and that way he doesn't have to hit that new tax bracket. He'll literally just go play golf for the rest of the year, and then he'll live off of dividends, etc., and investments. And he'll go. There's all kinds of methods where they go into debt. They'll take out bank loans to buy their stuff. They'll write off the debt as a tax break. There's all kinds of methods they do to skirt this. In the worst case scenario, they will move their businesses out of America. This is just strategy, and you can't do this to wealthy people for that reason, as much as Americans hate that. Even I, to some degree, recognize the uneven playing field of billionaires, but it is the reality. Nevertheless, regardless of any of the logic that goes behind that, and I could explain it better if I went into detail, but that's not why I'm streaming. Regardless of that, of the circumstances and how unreasonable it is for those reasons, this is a promise that is going to be appealing to most Americans. Most Americans are not making $46,000 per year. Most married couples aren't averaging $92,000 per year on a shared income. Most couples, if you're on a two-income household, man and woman married, they're only averaging anywhere between $50,000 to $75,000 per year. So this literally covers the vast majority of Americans under this new plan. This will be appealing to Americans right now. And the worst part is, it's actually kind of using Trump's strategy against him. Trump ran off of the possibility, at least, of abolishing the income tax, supposedly going to be replacing them with tariff-generated income. And now we know the Supreme Court has come out against the method of him implementing those tariffs, not the tariffs themselves, but the implementation of them, the method that he used to implement them, the IEEPA. And so, is Trump going to abolish income tax during his presidency? I think that that's unlikely, and I was hopeful that he would, because truthfully, income tax is like a crime, in all honesty. And if he doesn't do it, and if Democrats start running on doing it, Democrats will win by far. Income tax is probably the biggest tax that Americans pay in the form of a lump sum throughout the year, and it feels criminal to Americans. No American likes paying income tax. Most Americans recognize that income tax shouldn't exist. And this administration currently ran off of the idea of possibly abolishing it, and I don't think they're going to. And if the Democrats run on the idea, even if they themselves don't wind up doing it either, that's what will win, especially if Republicans also don't run on the idea. And then even if Republicans do run on the idea, the track record of this administration will have to be a good one in order for people to be willing to believe the Republican candidate in 2028 over the Democrat one. If this Trump economy doesn't take off and if we're not living very well, nobody will believe the Republican candidate in 2028, and they'll be looking for a change. And then a Democrat candidate like Chris Van Hollen will come up and say, I've got a plan. No income tax for anybody earning less than $46,000 a year or jointly earning less than, $92,000, 96, whatever it is. Economic populism wins elections. And that's why it's so important for this Trump economy to do well. Because if it doesn't, the Republican candidate can't credibly run on economic populism in 2028 and be widely believed enough to win. And the Democrats will be able to, because people will want the change out of either spite, dissatisfaction, frustration, or desperation. So I wanted to point that out because that's important. And once again, what we're witnessing right now, and the at least public perception of all of this, is Trump cares more about Israel and more about liberating Persians than he does about the cost of living crisis that Americans are facing right here in America. Tonya says he won because he lulled his followers into believing his alternative facts. That's how any politician wins. Bunch of Names says income tax was to replace losses from alcohol sales during Prohibition. Why do we still have it? Exactly. By the way, why do we have Prohibition? We could thank women for Prohibition. So this is women's fault, Bunch of Names. Most people in my chat won't be smart enough to recognize that, but you'll understand. When you tax the rich a lot more, it just feels so good. And with economic uncertainty rising, lower or abolish income tax sounds good. Yeah, taxing the rich, it sounds nice and all, but the rich have too many loopholes to exploit to be able to avoid paying the taxes, including and up to them literally just relocating their entire business overseas. So it just doesn't work. But it doesn't matter. My point is it doesn't matter that it doesn't work. The Democrats will run on it. It will be appealing to Americans, especially ones who are desperate. So, yeah, I wanted to point that out. That's an important one. Now, on to the polling. That's what I wanted to discuss next. Where was that? Here we go. First one I wanted to discuss, the U.S. economy is, according to Polling USA, 53% think it's getting worse. Only 23% think it's getting better. About 18% say it's staying the same. Those who say it's getting better, 67% of them are MAGA voters. Big surprise, right? They're going to follow Trump to the death. And metaphoric death. I don't mean that, of course. They're going to Trump. Well, actually, I kind of do mean that because a lot of MAGA voters are boomers, and boomers are hitting the deceased line at record, or they're hitting the deceased line more and more as time goes on, right? So, literally, they probably will follow Trump to the death. But MAGA voters, a lot of MAGA voters will stay loyal to Trump. So they're going to either gaslight themselves into believing the economy is better, or they'll feel it because they're boomers that have had a 401k for 40 years invested in the market. The markets are doing well. They own 2 homes now. They're pulling $500,000 of equity out of their home that they bought for 18 grand, 45 years ago. So for a select few people, the economy at least appears to be doing better because they've been alive long enough to be insulated from all the everyday problems of the cost of living and affordability. So yeah, MAGA 67%, but only 13% of independents think it's getting better, and only 2% of Democrats think it's getting better. And this is important to emphasize as well. President Donald Trump, in my opinion, and from what I've seen from polls and different demographics, President Donald Trump did not win based off of Republican support alone. President Donald Trump won because he won over record rates of Latino men, African American men, Gen Z men, the youth. He didn't win in majority on either of those demographics, but he pulled much more of them than prior Republican candidates had. He was able to win them over. He was able to win over an extensive group of independents and moderates who look, rightfully so, at the ridiculously radical liberal progressive party that is super pro-abortion, super pro-transgender mutilation nonsense. And a lot of those independents and moderates, they thought, there's no way I can side with that, rightfully so. Then they live under Biden during the pandemic and the 9.1% inflation spike, which, to be fair, like I've stated a couple times, was partly Trump's fault too. But so they, of course, voted Republican. So when you see independents are only at 13% when it thinks to thinking the economy is getting better, that's a very bad sign for the grand old party. And this U.gov poll was conducted March 2nd, just a few days ago. Not a good sign. Really not. Okay. What was the next point I wanted to cover here? Sorry, bear with me here. What do we have? Yeah, here's the other one. A Fox News poll. Because MAGA boomers love their Fox News. So this one will hit harder for them. Where is that? Where did I know I reposted that, but where? Yeah, here we go. Okay. Take a look at this. So Trump's net approval on issues. This covers all issues across the board, and this is a Fox Newsroom poll, right? So job performance as a whole. Border security, +4. Rightfully so. That is the one thing that Trump is still holding on to and doing a good job with, and it's undeniable. Our southern border is completely secure, and that's a great thing. I don't give Trump so much credit on that when it comes to me looking positively on his administration currently, because he did the same thing in his first administration. And then in 2020, we had record levels of border crossings while he was still in office. Why? Because he softened his stance on immigration at the end of 2017 in an attempt to allow the Republicans to maintain control of Congress. And it failed, by the way. The Republicans lost the House in the midterms of 2018, and then we wound up paying for it in 2019 and 2020 with record levels, pretty much, of border crossings while Trump was still in office. But he locked down the southern border at first in his first term as well. It didn't ultimately wind up meaning anything, especially because he never built the border wall in his first term, and it doesn't look like he's going to build the border wall this term either. And what that means is if there's no border wall, a Democrat can come in and just reopen up everything, and with no border wall at all to at least filter them all through one location, they're just going to cross at huge rates again, and millions will pour right back into this country. So that's my criticism still. That's my pessimistic outlook. But he does get credit, at least right now, for shutting it all down, thankfully so. Immigration, the next one, of course, perfectly in line with what I was just talking about, he's now at -6, according to Fox News. This is also deserved. He has capitulated to Tim Walz in Minnesota, Mayor Jacob Frey in Minneapolis, and he's pulling back on his mass deportation promises. The boomers don't want to believe this. They want to say he won in Minnesota, which is why he pulled all of ICE out of there onto the next state, they say. But that's not actually the case. And you can recognize it in the mixture of gaslighting and complete tone shift and verbiage being used when he specifically emphasizes the worst of the worst and the violent illegals being deported rather than all of them. And then he even clarifies it by saying no farmers are going to lose their workers. We got to go easy on the farmers. So it's a no-brainer. And as a result, rightfully so, he's now in the yellow with OSZ here, immigration at -6, jobs at -13. Once again, rightfully so. I'm covering all of that right now. Manufacturing's down, right? Americans are being replaced by Indians on H-1B visas. Americans are being replaced by AI. Americans can't even get a job because AI filters all of their applications out. So, yeah, jobs down 92,000 for February, according to the jobs market report. Not good. At -13 now. Foreign policy, -20. That one makes a lot of sense. We're in war now in the Middle East, and no matter what fake polls you see that are out there, most Americans do not want that. The economy, -23. That makes sense as well. If you're a boomer or an Xer, you own a home already, you have a 401k most likely, you're in the stock market, you're benefiting from all of that. You can pull your equity out of your home at any moment's time. But if you're a millennial, you're only half of millennials, I think, own homes right now. If you're a Gen Zer, only 27% of Gen Zers own homes. Cost of living's outrageous. Grocery prices are not getting better. They're actually getting worse. So -23 on the economy. Very fair. Healthcare, -23. Tariffs, -27. Inflation, -35. So more reality for you right there. No way to really escape that. And I wanted to point this one out next. Another big one. And this is really ultimately what stuff like the stock market comes down to, by the way. Gold, silver, all of it. This is the reality of the economy in general. Uncertainty. Bottom line, certainty and uncertainty. our Wall Street economy is basically determined by optimism or pessimism, the bulls versus the bears, right? And it really does just come down to how people feel, which is what is so crazy to understand about all of this. But the problem is the World Uncertainty Index is reaching historic highs. You can see it's higher than it was even during 2001 when we went to war. It's higher than it was during peak 2021 COVID. It is soaring. Everything is uncertain, and this is what could. This right here, you're looking at this graph right here. You have to understand this. If the bubble's going to pop, this is what will pop it. Uncertainty will pop all economic bubbles, and that's what we're at risk for right now. So I wanted to point that out too. That's very, very important. What's causing a lot of this uncertainty, by the way? Tariffs, which I actually support on this channel, and I've made videos on why. Though the Trump administration has not done a great job of handling them or the messaging behind them. But even more so, this right here. Inexplicably. Undeniably. This will now cause uncertainty to explode. This was in Iran just about, what now? Just about 3 hours ago. Massive explosion in Iran. And reportedly, we have hit an Iranian oil refinery. So oil now per barrel will likely skyrocket to $100 or more. So gas prices are going to rise again. So, and war, of course, is a roll of the dice, like I said last stream. So this will not do the economy any favors. And for the main reason being, like I just stated, our economy, truthfully, is based off of human emotion, optimism, or pessimism, certainty or uncertainty. War makes everything less certain, not more. And that's why, of course, Trump wants to be out in 4 to 5 weeks. But I think Trump is literally foolish for that stance. I don't see... There's a chance they all surrender, yes, and I hope they do. I want to be wrong on this so bad. I will look forward to the day I can go live 6 weeks from now and say, guys, I was totally wrong. Trump did it again. All of Iran has surrendered. We're pulling out now. It didn't cost us too much money. Now we can get back to normal, but I just don't see it going that way. And I wanted to show this as well, too, because I just found this pretty funny. Just to start wrapping up the stream here. Here we go. Shared by Owen Schroyer. I've been checking out his show a little bit more when I've had the time. This was from 2005. I can't even hold my laughter in because it's just... Why War in Iraq is Right for America by Ben Shapiro. And I guarantee you, if you go on this guy's YouTube channel right now, I guarantee you he's loving the Iran war. And I've just drawn so many comparisons to Iran with Iraq 2004. Just seeing this is just, I can't even, it's really not funny, but it's just so tragically funny that you just gotta laugh at some point. I mean, you gotta laugh about it, honestly. So I just wanted to show that. I just had to show that because it's so ridiculous. You see his little face there, August 11th, 2005. Of course he loved the Iraq war. Of course he did. Yeah. And then to leave it all off, I wanted to share this too. We're striking oil refineries. We're back in the Middle East. It's breeding higher levels of uncertainty, not just in America, but across the globe. The economy is struggling so much right now for the average, everyday, especially young American. I'm tired of the young generations not being put first, by the way. Everything Trump is doing is the boomers' last gasp, as Owen Schroyer would say. It really is just about them. They love the Iran war. They want the Muslims dead. And, not that I care. I view Islam as a demonic religion. I just want to be divorced from the Middle East. I just want to be able to go to the grocery store and not buy 3 items, not lobster or caviar, by the way, or salmon or, steak. 3 items that should be affordable, costing me $14 to $16 just so I can have a dinner. I just want to be able to, live comfortably like my parents were able to. I want a president who focuses on Americans and domestic issues. And instead we're getting another war and more foreign affairs and Israel first and all of this nonsense. It's Iran first even now. He's willing to put Iran first. And it's like, he should know better. And the fact of the matter is he does know better. Where is this Trump? This is the Trump that I voted for.
They want to draft your kids to die in wars, and they will never fight themselves. We'll stay around the country for 15 years, just bomb the hell out of everybody, make everybody miserable. Nobody knows why we're there, the wars that never end. These endless wars that we've been in, I've gotten us out of so many. We don't want to get into wars. We're tired of fighting. I'm the only president in the last 84 years that didn't start a war. Under Trump, we will have no more wars, no more wars, no more wars. We will have prosperity and peace. We will have prosperity and we will have peace. Remember, I'm the president of peace. They said, he will start a war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars. He's going to start a war. I said, no. My rhetoric is going to keep us out of wars. And that's what happened. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker. We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into.
Where is that guy? That's the guy that I voted for. That's the guy we all wanted, and we're not getting it. So, and it's radically different from his first term, and there's a lot of reasons why. You can look into Miriam Adelson and the level of funding he's received from her if you want to know the full story there, basically. But, he was right in the fact that in his first term, he was the president of peace, in all honesty. He can rightfully take credit for that, and we rightfully looked at that and said, that'll be his second term too, only it isn't. And, it's a tragedy in all honesty, and it's not looking good for conservatives. But hope must remain on the horizon. We just need a better quality candidate to run for the Republicans. We need a larger amount of better quality candidates to run for Republicans. We need Christian American nationalists to rise up in this country and take positions of power to restore this nation. We're far beyond the point of ever being able to conserve it anymore. Conservatives haven't conserved anything. I know it's just cliche at this point to say, but it is just so true. Conservatives failed to conserve anything. And so we are at the point now where this country must be restored. We need to invade the GOP. It must be a takeover. We must take over our party, because candidates like Trump, at his age now, with his boomer philosophies and his boomer stance on everything and his level of tone deafness, are not going to cut it anymore. That's the bottom line. So, glory to America. Don't give up hope on this country. America can be saved. It is still the best country to live in by far, even with everything that's wrong with it. I certainly wouldn't want to live in the Middle East, that shithole. I wouldn't want to live in Europe. I wouldn't want to live in the UK and be arrested for free speech. I wouldn't want to live in South America. Definitely not Canada. I want to live here in America. I just demand that our politicians put us first and make this country better. So, glory to America. God bless the USA. Thanks for everybody who tuned in. Dial up. I think you just got here. Unfortunately, but thanks for tuning in regardless. Be sure to like the stream, subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this. I'll be back tomorrow. We're going to discuss the term Judeo-Christian and why it's Luciferian language, why it shouldn't be used, shouldn't be accepted, and doesn't define what Christianity actually is. I'll be